Ryan C. Warner, welcome to the conversation today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. I'm really honored to be here.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Texas. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. Today, we're going to be talking about how leaders can effectively develop and apply emotional intelligence to enhance their leadership skills and improve team performance. Emotional intelligence really is just such an important factor. I think it always has been, but I think especially in this really volatile time that we live in with just so much uncertainty, so much happening around us. Change is constant. People are trying to navigate so many different things and so much technological disruption, so much fear and anxiety. I just think as much as any time in recent history, we just need more empathetic and emotionally intelligent leaders. And that's not necessarily a skill that we always hire for. It's not necessarily a skill that comes naturally to all leaders. And so it's something I think it's important to talk about. And it's also something I truly believe that everyone can, it's a skill, it's an attribute that everyone can develop if they're intentional about it and if they give time and energy towards it. So this is what we're going to explore together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Ryan's bio with everybody. Ryan C. Warner, PhD, is globally recognized as a speaker, award-winning psychologist, and a published author and esteemed executive coach. As the Chief Executive Officer of RC Warner Consulting, he strengthens organizational performance by boosting inclusion and mental wellness in the workplace for high-performing organizations, Fortune 500 companies, and government entities. He is passionate about supporting high-performing leaders and reaching the top 1% in their industry through improved leadership development and emotional intelligence. Through his captivating speaking, coaching, and consulting solutions, Dr. Warner empowers workplaces to achieve success by cultivating a positive and fulfilling work culture where all employees thrive. Dr. Warner has been a featured guest on numerous podcasts, has spoken on various radio and TV shows, and has authored a wealth of scholarly research articles reaching millions worldwide. Such a wonderful background. You've accomplished so many really great things and do such an important work. Ryan, anything that you would like to highlight before we dive on into the broader conversation?
Yeah, I would like to say this is outside of those accolades, what really motivates me in this work is when I work with high performing leaders across the globe and I really see them come from point A to point B, right? And that
Yeah, yeah.
insight that they gain through coaching and through my consulting services and support, just emphasizes how important, EQ is, to help organizations and leaders thrive. So I'm really honored to talk more about this today.
Yeah, I agree. I think seeing that kind of that delta, where they begin, where they end up, and seeing that growth over time. I know I personally really appreciate, seeing that in myself. Like when I reflect and I journal and I can see, growth, that's super powerful, as I see it in myself. It's really great when I see it in others, whether it's a student that I teach in a class or it's someone that I coach in an executive setting. It's just that's the best thing. That's where it's at, right? And I really do see that potential in everyone. We all have such an innate potential for growth and continual development if we give time to it, if we give energy to it, and uh, intentionality towards that continual growth. And it doesn't have to be something, I mean, it really isn't going to be something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to be something, though, that if we're just consistent with whatever it is, whether it's emotional intelligence or XYZ goal, whatever, if we just try to be just a little bit better each and every day and we're consistent, we can. And then we look back months later, years later, and we can see this tremendous growth over time, and it's just so wonderful to see.
Yes, definitely.
Well, let's start by just talking about some of the common types of challenges you see that leaders are facing when emotional intelligence really could be a key element towards improving how they're, facing those work challenges.
So as you previously mentioned, oftentimes we don't emphasize this like in the workplace. Maybe we put the focus on technical expertise, instead of emotional intelligence. And leaders are often promoted based on the fact that they thrive in the technical type of industry that they're in. But oftentimes, less, I think, focus is given on like interpersonal factors and communication and how they manage stress and those type of facets. So some common like challenges that I've seen is number one, we think about the fast pace type of work setting, right? That often leaders have to navigate, and oftentimes they're trying to put out fires or, you
Yeah.
know, produce some type of outcome. And less focus is on how do I manage interpersonal conflict? How do I manage stress and burnout within myself? How do I recognize the way that I communicate has a significant impact on how someone shows up and how they perform? Right. So I think the significant challenge that I've seen, in the workplace is it's not prioritized, it's not embedded within the culture, and also I think there's a false narrative out there that pretty much puts an emphasis on, oh well, leaders who have high emotional intelligence, they have the personality, that aligns with that, right? Not recognizing, as you previously mentioned, hey, if we really work towards it and be intentional, then we can all grow in this domain. And I think lastly, we just don't recognize how important it is, right? Where research shows that teams and leaders who really emphasize ongoing, team communication and being able to strengthen their emotional intelligence within themselves and within others, then those teams perform, at a five
Hmm.
times higher rate compared to the teams who do not emphasize that, right? And in turn, that boosts motivation, that boosts team dynamics, and also enhances outcome and boosts profit within organizations, right? So I think we just need to recognize those three gaps so that then we can identify, okay, this is actually really important, let's figure out what to do about it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not like people don't recognize that it's important. I, I mean, talking about emotional intelligence isn't new. I think people have been talking about it a lot lately, especially, over the last decade, especially over the last 5 years since the pandemic. It's gotten a lot of attention because that was such a hard time, and people really started to recognize more than ever the need for empathy and the need for, um, support and just being emotionally agile as a leader. And it really just got a spotlight, right, during that time. Um, Yet, like you said, it doesn't get the focus, it doesn't get the priority. And why? People understand that it's important. People understand that it has a good business case. Like there's really important outcomes tied to it. I think most people understand all of that. So it's not a lack of understanding. It's not a lack of um, even desire. I think a lot of times it often just comes down to just the competing priorities. It comes down to um, that chicken with their head cut off, running around putting out fires kind of dynamic that so many leaders just find themselves in. So I think most people wake up in the morning thinking that they want to go in and they want to do a good job and they want to treat their people well and they want to be there to support their people. And like I'm guessing that most leaders want to do that, right? And then you show up to work and you start to like, you know, pull your hair out because all of a sudden you have all these different things you have to respond to. And then all of a sudden, that whole empathy thing and that whole like emotional intelligence thing kind of flies out the window and you're just like responding. And, you just you don't even have time to think about priorities. You're just like responding. Right. And I
And,
think
and
that's
that's
how,
and that's how we navigate as human beings, right? Like we when we're in that crisis, that fight or flight, we go to what we know. We go to what's comfortable. So yeah, that makes sense why we respond that way.
yeah. And it's really just so unfortunate that that's the common way that roles are designed, that organizations are set up. Um, and it doesn't need to be that way, I guess is what I'm suggesting. Part of why it's that way is because leaders kind of design their own workflow and their own time and their own boundaries that way. Part of it is because organizations design roles that way. And there are ways to disrupt that pattern. It can be hard to disrupt that pattern, especially if that's what you're used to. But you can slowly start to disrupt that pattern and you can start to reclaim time, and it may be that 100% of your time is spent putting out fires every day, and maybe you start to scale that back, and now you've reclaimed about 20% of your time. 80% is putting out fires, 20% is like reclaimed, and then over time 30% is reclaimed, and 40% and 50% is reclaimed. But it doesn't have to be that way. Like you can reclaim your time, and you can as you start to uh, focus on like strategic and intentional presence and like empowering your people and your team, and like just all the things like around good leadership and management. All of a sudden, all that like putting out fires and chickens with their heads cut off kind of approach to leadership, that starts to fade to the background. And you do have more time to now focus on relationships and to focus on support and empowerment and all those things that now that emotional intelligence um, is going to be so vital and so important, and that intention, that hope, that desire that maybe you do have, now you actually will be able to focus on. So maybe, for a lot of really well-intentioned leaders that just don't feel like, regardless of what they want to do, they don't feel like they have the time to do it, maybe that's a good place to start.
Yes, I definitely agree. And also recognizing there are small steps that we can take that don't have to be extremely time consuming to slowly be able to thrive, while we're on that journey to strengthening emotional intelligence.
Yeah, yeah. So any specific examples that you can think of, around how emotional intelligence has really positively impacted leadership outcomes in some of the most successful organizations that you've worked with? And I suppose this could even be your own personal examples, when you've in places you've worked, but also as you've gone in as a coach or as a consultant.
Mhm. Yeah. So first, if we look at the researchers out there, one thing that really it's got me excited about this is when I learned about. Have you heard of the Google Project Oxygen
Mm,
before initiative?
yeah,
So I think it was done in I can't recall what year. Um, Maybe 2009-ish, I believe. And ultimately, their main question was like, what makes great managers great, right? What are the
yeah,
traits and what are the actions that they engage in that helps, boost performance and outcomes? So they found like a couple of, I believe, 7 or 8 uh, different type of behaviors that they engaged in. And one of the main behaviors was like being a good coach, right? So not just being authoritative and saying, hey, you need to do X, but trying to coach and mentor others, right? And in turn, those individuals feel valued, they feel heard, they felt that, oh, my leader actually cares about me and my professional and personal growth and development, right? Another attribute that really stood out was empowering their team, right? So they did not just delegate, but instead they figured out how do I create this intrinsic motivation within my team so that they now can feel empowered to engage in whatever action they need to complete the goal and objective at hand, right?
mhm,
There was also interpersonal factors that arose in regards to being a good communicator and
yeah,
being able to convey objectives in a clear and concise way. So all of those aspects ultimately showed how important emotional intelligence is within organizations, right, to boost outcomes and performance. So that's like the data that's out there. And in my particular experience, I've been able to have the opportunities to coach leaders across the globe. I was literally on a call yesterday with an individual with the United Nations, and she was in London, and she talked about her experience, being a leader and her challenges that she's going through, especially with all the things that are going on in the world, right?
yeah,
And in turn, how that has impacted, her ability to manage stress, and in turn impacts her ability to communicate to her team and manage interpersonal conflict, et cetera. So what we've been working on is say how can we take an intrapersonal perspective first, right? What's going on within yourself, that then is leading to interpersonal challenges. Once we take that intrapersonal perspective, then we look interpersonally. Okay, within your decision making when it comes to either putting out fires, right, managing problems, or solving conflict, right, intervening when needed, etc. How does that impact those interpersonal dynamics? And then one thing that I often focus on as well is taking a systemic type of perspective. How do we
Hmm.
embed EQ within the culture of the organization? Okay, because I can do everything right, but if I go into an organization that's inherently toxic, okay,
Yeah.
and does
Yeah.
not value taking breaks, or does not value self-care, does not value conflict resolution, etc., then it's going to be really hard for me to thrive in that environment. So a lot of the work that I do when it comes to consulting with Fortune 500 companies and government entities is how do we look at the system? How do we look at the practices, the policies,
Hmm. Hmm.
and in turn identify any gaps there that can best support team members and leaders to thrive. So those are some real life examples, both looking at the
Yeah.
research data out there and also just anecdotal experiences, that I've seen in my work.
I like that one. And I really do like the the self work that's important to do, right? Like we really do need to focus on ourselves. We need to focus on what we can do. We can so that personal self-reflective work, the interpersonal work that we can do with others, but there really is that systems work, right? That the 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 organizational systems, the work design, the policies, practices, procedures, like all that systems work, all of that matters. So all of this is interconnected for sure. And so just yeah, that's a really great reminder for all of us as we're trying to do this. But it does all start with us, right? It starts with us being owning, kind of like our own personal experience and owning how we show up to work and showing how we interact with other people. That's really important. Maybe in our last 5 minutes or so, as we continue to discuss, let's explore some practical steps here. What are some practical approaches that organizations might take to foster that culture that really prioritizes emotional intelligence in leadership development, that prioritizes emotional intelligence in the day-to-day, so that we're not creating that culture of urgency, that culture um, of just constant emergency, right? That like we were talking about earlier.
Mhm. So I will go back to that multifaceted approach that I often take: interpersonal, and also systemic. So first, intrapersonally, how do we recognize our own triggers? Okay, I can try the best I can to separate who Ryan is in my personal life versus who Ryan is as a CEO and a leader, right? But really, I bring my same personality traits and attributes, both my strengths and my weaknesses to the workplace. Okay, and do I really know myself? Do I really recognize that, hey, I really like things being done in a meticulous way, right? And I'm a type A person. And when others don't take that urgency, then that triggers me, right? That gets me kind of frustrated. I need to
Yeah.
really recognize that, right? Because people on my team have all different type of personality traits, right? So how do I recognize when that is coming out of me and how that's impacting my decision making and also my communication with others? Okay, so I think number one thing we can all do is try to recognize what are our triggers. Okay, we say we know ourselves, right? But what's really something that gets under our skin, and then in turn, how does that impact how we show up? Whether we are a manager, whether we're a CEO, whether we're a junior, person in the workplace, right? Because we have to first recognize that. And as you mentioned, you already say, hey, what you do personally is journal and write things down, right? We can do that individually by ourselves, or we can seek out coaching, right, or expert, guidance to help support that. From an interpersonal perspective, we need to get feedback. Okay, we all have biases. We have shortcuts that we take, these mental cognitive shortcuts, and we think we know how we respond. But really, if we don't really get that feedback from others, then we may be missing something. right? So how can I get feedback? There are structured
Yeah.
ways to do that, 360 assessments, but also there's unstructured ways. How can you go to someone that you trust and say, hey, I really want you to tell me, how do I show up as a leader, right? What were your first impressions of me, right? What are some strengths that you really see me leverage, and what are some areas of growth, that are needed? And if we're able to get that constant feedback, right, and be open to that, that's going to broaden our cognitive flexibility and be able to help us show up a little bit better. Okay. And then lastly,
Can I
systemic.
just say to that real quick? Yeah,
Sure.
just to reiterate, I mean, it's definitely implied in what you just said, but we 100%, we all have those blind spots, right? And that's not a bad thing. Like it's not an indictment of anybody. Like it's just natural. It's just the reality. We all have blind spots. And so we can all be self-reflective and we can all do all those types of things, and that can help reduce the blind spots, but we're all still going to have blind spots. And so just recognize that that's always going to be the case. I'm always going to have blind spots. And so that's why it's so important to do those things that you just said, like seek out the feedback, seek out the external inputs so that we can reduce the blind spots.
Yes, definitely. And to do that, right, we have to be open-minded. Okay.
Yeah,
I work with
yeah,
so many leaders that say, hey, I've been successful. So in turn, why do I need to change anything? Right. However, right, if we actually get feedback from those that they lead, there's others that, really feel impacted negatively, right? Due to the fact of how they're treated, right? So just being able to be open, have that openness, and be receptive to feedback is important for sure. And then last, we need to look at the system, right? We need to look at the procedures and the policies and the practices in place. And where are some blind spots there? Where are some gaps that may be apparent, right? That we can look into so that we can further emphasize EQ within, just the culture. Right. So, for instance, I'm a military veteran, and one thing that we did every single day when I was active duty in the Air Force is when we were in the mental health clinic, we did a huddle, right? And we checked in with each other. Hey, before we get into the daily mission and objective today, how are you all really doing, right? Let's not just say good, right? Let's just not be surface level, right? What are some things that, maybe cause some anxiety or some fear right now, right? And let's figure out how we can come together to support each other. Right. So we didn't get too deep, right? It wasn't a psychotherapy session or anything, but
yeah,
it was embedded within our daily huddles. Okay. And now that normalized this culture. Now we felt open. We had that psychological safety to really say, hey, I'm struggling right now, right? And I need a break, right? Or hey, I need to talk to someone about this, right? It was embedded within the hospital itself. And in turn, that helped individuals feel more engaged and feel more psychologically safe. Right. So that's just a practical example, right? How do you embed that within the culture of the organization to in turn, boost that likelihood that this continues, even when leaders move on and they leave the organization.
yeah, yeah. I love it. Well, this has just been a great conversation, and I know we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to discuss here, but I also note the time, and I'm going to have to let you go here in a minute. Before we wrap things up, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us the final word for today.
Yes, so you can find me. You can go to my website, www.rcwarnerconsulting.com. And also, we have a coaching program that helps support boosting EQ within managers and leaders. So feel free to look on the website to learn more about that. To just learn more about my background, you can Google Dr. Ryan C. Warner, and all my information will come up. The last word I would just want to give everyone is no matter where you're at on this journey, just recognize we can all continue to grow. We can all continue to learn about ourselves, and in turn, take that interpersonal, and systemic perspective to ensure that we're able to thrive in everything that we do.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Ryan. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Ryan can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.